I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
Hey everybody, it's Chris Bumbray here again for JoBlo.com with another video edition of the best movie you never saw. And this week I'm taking a look at a movie that Wikipedia says, that I say, is an underrated cult classic, Showdown in Little Tokyo, starring Dolph Lundgren and Brandon Lee as two mismatched cops who team up to take down a vicious Yakuza drug lord played by Cary-Hiroyuki Tagawa. This one co-stars a young Tia Carrere just before breaking out in Wayne's World and is directed by Mark L. Lester, director of Class of 1984 and Commando. Now, Showdown in Little Tokyo is a movie that barely got a theatrical release. Back in the late 80s, Dolph Lundgren was flying relatively high. Rocky IV was a huge hit and propelled him to leading man status in Masters of the Universe, which was a flop, but a reasonably high-grossing one nonetheless, especially on VHS, then in its heyday. He followed it up with Red Scorpion, which was oddly enough produced by Jack Abramoff. Now, if you've seen Casino Jack, you know what I'm talking about. And then in 1989, he did the first big screen version of The Punisher, although it sat on the shelf for 2 years before finally getting a direct-to-video release in the US and kind of pissed off fans because he doesn't wear the iconic skull t-shirt and actually just wears a leather jacket. Now, at this point, Lundgren's career began to cool, at least as far as big-budget studio films went, and when Showdown in Little Tokyo ran into some major post-production problems, Warner Brothers just dumped it. Basically, director Mark L. Lester had the movie taken away from him and chopped down to a shockingly brief 79 minutes by in-house editors, and Warner Brothers hated the final cut of this movie so much, they only put it out on 140 screens before dumping it to home video, and its grand total, theatrically, $2.2 million. Sounds like a disaster, right? A lot of people think Dolph Lundgren is kind of dumb, but let me tell you something. Dolph Lundgren is no fool. I think that Cary-Hiroyuki Tagawa put it best when he was interviewed in Random Roles, saying, "I don't know if many people realize Dolph Lundgren is a chemical engineer. He is not a dumb blonde guy. The guy is smart and he's a martial artist. We got along well." And Brandon Lee, well, he was just one of my heroes by association because of his dad, so we talked about that. He was just the sweetest guy. He had a really wonderful nature. So did Dolph, for that matter. They were both powerful in their own way, and I'm not talking about hardcore menacing guys. So yeah, it was a great experience. I had a lot of fun with those guys. And in fact, it's the fun, affable nature of Lundgren and Lee that I think makes Showdown in Little Tokyo such a good movie. You see, history resurrected Showdown in Little Tokyo in a very strange, tragic way. Less than 2 years after it hit theaters, Brandon Lee, whose star was in ascent following Rapid Fire, was tragically killed on the set of The Crow. As happens for a lot of actors who find their careers tragically cut short under strange circumstances, Lee became something of a cult icon, especially once The Crow came out, oddly paralleling the life of his father, Bruce Lee, although the respective levels of fame were never quite on the same level. Now, when Brandon Lee passed away, his earlier movies became super popular rentals, and Showdown in Little Tokyo, which was originally seen as a throwaway action movie, became one of our last few remaining looks at what Lee as a leading man would have been like had his life and career not been cut short, so in a weird way, it got another life. Lundgren himself seemed to really like Brandon Lee, writing recently on Twitter that Brandon Lee was a great guy and a great actor, and he misses him. Granted, Lundgren is the lead, but Lee totally steals the show as his flashy, fish-out-of-water partner. In true buddy cop fashion, they're polar opposites, with Lundgren, the American cop obsessed with the East, and Lee, the half-Asian cop more in tune with LA Valley culture.
My culture? Listen, champ, I was raised in the Valley. My dad's a white guy who's a dentist. I know about malls, MTV, driving dad's car on Mulholland.
They initially scrap before bonding over their shared love of destruction and mayhem, and given the abbreviated runtime, their bromance kicks into gear after only about 10 minutes of screen time, which is kind of hilarious, but also kind of amazing. Now, casting the half-Chinese Lee as someone of Japanese descent is a pretty culturally insensitive move and definitely wouldn't fly now, but one can't deny he tackles the role with aplomb. Clearly, he knew the right people would see him in this B-level actioner, and it's no wonder he went straight into Rapid Fire from this pretty big-budget solo adventure built all around him. Lee's performance is really out there, with him ultra charismatic, handsome, and stylish enough to be a leading man, but he also adds a little something to the part that makes it unique as far as these guys go. Mainly that his character seems to love Lundgren's. Now, not love him in that Riggs and Murtaugh way, I mean he really loves him.
Where's Minako?
She's in my room.
I knew that was gonna happen.
Like, is in love with him, even commenting in a line that's since become immortal that you have the biggest dick I've ever seen on a man. I mean, this is a line that he actually says in the movie, and he means it as a sincere compliment, and it's not really treated as a jokey throwaway line. What's funny is, originally the line was, "You have the biggest dick I've ever seen," and the studio, for some reason, made them go back in and add, "the biggest dick I've ever seen on a man."
Kenner, just in case we get killed, I wanted to tell you, you have the biggest dick I've ever seen on a man.
Thanks. I don't know what to say.
How about don't get killed?
Don't get killed.
You too.
On a man, I mean, that makes it kind of weirder, doesn't it? Anyway, so I have to say there's a lot of ambiguity around his characters, and in some way, Brandon Lee's character is, I guess, the first out-of-the-closet major action star of all time. Kudos to them, for at least going that far. I also love Lundgren's knowing thanks, I don't know what to say as response. I mean, he knows what he's packing, but he's also sensitive to his partner. He knows that he's in love with him, and you know what? He's flattered and maybe even a little curious.
Thanks. I don't know what to say.
How about don't get killed?
Don't get killed.
Meanwhile, the 79-minute running time gives this film a breakneck pace, with it going down pretty easy as there's a fist fight, gunfight, or car chase at least every 5 minutes or so. I also have to note that as a kid, I had the biggest crush on Tia Carrere, who's Dolph Lundgren's love interest here, and yes, she does have a nude scene, but it was a body double. That was something that they used to do back in the day. And Cary-Hiroyuki Tagawa, one of the best villains of the 90s, pretty menacing as the Yakuza bad guy. Now, I love a good meet cute in my 80s action movies, especially between the two partners, and this is a pretty good one. You see, Dolph Lundgren's getting coffee, and he foils a robbery, as happens in most action movies of the era, just as his new partner comes walking by and mistakes him for a criminal. Also, something that happens in pretty much every action movie ever. I mean, it worked in Lethal Weapon. Now, rather than waste any time actually getting to know each other, as soon as they're introduced, they have to dodge bullets. This is narrative economy, people. Narrative economy, thy name is Showdown in Little Tokyo.
Please, hold it!
Now, Showdown in Little Tokyo, despite being an absolute flop in theaters, has always been a really popular catalog title for Warner Brothers, so it's available on Blu-ray and DVD. Just make sure not to buy the pen and scan version, and you can get it pretty cheaply on streaming. Please understand that to a degree, my love of Showdown in Little Tokyo is tongue-in-cheek. It's not a good movie per se, but it's really a fun one. Truth be told, I'd rather watch a fun B-level action movie like this starring cool guys like Dolph Lundgren and Brandon Lee than a Steven Seagal movie because, well,
I just got out of prison for something I didn't do, and before that, I used to study real hard and learned all kinds of different ways to kill motherfuckers just like you.
he's an asshole. I mean, his work is nearly unwatchable after we've all learned what a prick he seemingly is. Dolph Lundgren, however, seems like a great guy, and Brandon Lee, from what I heard, was a great guy too. I really enjoy this one, and revisiting it is always a blast, even if you wind up more than a little bit bummed that Brandon Lee never lived to achieve the peak movie stardom that he so richly deserved. Check this one out. Also watch Rapid Fire, and for sure watch The Crow if for some reason you haven't seen it. Until next time, I'm Chris Bumbray for JoBlo.com.